What's up, everyone? What's up, everyone? This is When Men Open Up, a show where we are redefining manhood through transparency. My name is Dominique,
And I'm Dexter.
and this is through partnership with WYTV7 Christian Broadcasting Network. And we're on the same series, Talks I Wish I Had with My Father or My Dad. And we've been really talking to a lot of viewers, a lot of listeners about different conversations they wish they would have had with their father and so forth. And this is another heavy one. All of them are going to be heavy in some form or fashion, but it's just something about this one. And Dad, do you still love me?
Oh, yeah. I think when we were identifying what we were going to call this subject or call this conversation, and I think when we said it, it was like, ooh, that's kind of heavy.
We wanted people to feel it. We really wanted people to feel it, and people really felt this one. And even when we posted the flyer, it was a lot of I don't know if I want to say great comments, but it was some transparent comments about what some of the things they wish they would have done and felt and so forth and so forth. But you know, when we think about this question, first of all, let's introduce ourselves. My name is Dominique.
Well, we did the introduction. I think it's so heavy.
Yeah, we did the introduction, but just in case, my name is Dominique. This is Dexter. Just in case.
Yeah.
But you know, when we think about that question, Dad, do you still love me?
Yeah.
Some people may ask, okay, what influenced this question? What influenced this topic? And to be quite honest, it can be so many different things. You get what I'm saying? And when we talk about just the absence of our father, when we talk about, you know, when you're a child and your father's not around, you may blame yourself. There's a lot of children that blame themselves. A lot of counselors would say that. A lot of mental health professionals would say, you know, when there's arguments between a couple, when the mother or the father is not around, kids usually process that as, you know what, I must have did something, or maybe I wasn't enough. But there is an unknown about that.
Definitely. I mean, it's very heavy, and you know, one of the things, in addition to the absentee father, we've talked about this before, prior to us launching When Men Open Up, but we talked about the emotionally absent father as well.
Yeah.
And so it's not just the one who's physically not present, but it's the one who's also emotionally unavailable. And so these things have, you know, some real ramifications on the individual, the child. And, you know, a lot of times I think it actually serves as the foundation point for feelings of inadequacy.
Right.
You know, much to what you were saying, you know, the child as an adolescent is internalizing this absence as their fault, you know, and this is something way too heavy for a child to even be thinking about, you know, let alone internalizing and taking ownership of. And what ends up happening is that you have now an adult who's already had this trauma introduced to their psyche at a very young age, and they never have a chance to really develop from that place. And so, you know, that really speaks to the serious nature of this particular subject.
Yeah, and like you said before, they have this feeling of inadequacy. They have this feeling that they're not enough. They have a feeling that there's something wrong about me. But keep in mind, when you have those thoughts and those feelings as a child, it doesn't necessarily mean that when you get older they just go away.
Exactly.
It stays there. You get what I'm saying? Especially if we're not, if there's no counseling going on during the childhood, if the child doesn't have the opportunity or doesn't have anybody around that they can trust to even have that conversation, now we don't even know how to really process that. We don't know how to verbalize that. We don't know how to express that, and that carries over. So we'll wonder why we have certain men who are walking around and they don't feel like, you know what, they're enough. They don't feel like, you know what, I don't have anything to really provide to this world. I don't have any value to put out in this world. And a lot of professionals will say, you know what, some of it has a lot to do with that fatherlessness and the fact that they didn't have a chance to even just process that.
You know, one of the things that many people don't know But prior to our launching When Men Open Up, one of the premises that we opened up was from Malachi chapter 4. And there's a story where it talks about the hearts of fathers being turned back to the sons, and the hearts of sons being turned back to the fathers. The interesting thing is that this heart speaks to a compassion and a concern for the overall well-being of the son,
right?
And vice versa. But the interesting thing is, it says that if this reconciliation of hearts doesn't happen, that there was going to be a curse associated with it. The curse is not just a geographical curse, but it's an internal curse. What it is that I find no validation and no understanding of who I am, because the person who's supposed to speak to that is not there to do that. And so what it is that I grow up confused and not really understanding my true identity, because the person who was supposed to be demonstrating it, modeling it for me, has separated themselves from the equation.
Okay.
And so essentially what we have is we have a lot of men who really don't know who they are on account, because the person who was supposed to demonstrate it for them, once again, separated themselves from the relationship with that son, with that daughter.
Most definitely. And, how does this conversation help? How does these conversations help? It brings more understanding of what's really going on. So along with the identity or that curse, you have so many men that are at this point now that's saying, you know what, I feel like I have to learn things that I should have already learned. I feel like I'm put in so many situations or scenarios that I'm not equipped for. Exactly. I feel like, I should already know how to do X, Y, and Z. I feel like as a husband, I have to learn so much to even get to a certain point. As a father, I had to learn so much to actually get to that point where I'm just adequate, that I'm just enough, and so forth. And
that's good, man.
Even by me just saying that, it's really heavy. You know what I'm saying? So it gets to the point now, that feeling of I'm unequipped is such a heavy feeling for these guys, for these young men and for the men. I don't have the tools, and I know the tools should be there.
And I mean, and that's powerful that you said that. One of the things that I'm a firm believer that sons are supposed to be carriers of the torch.
Right.
The issue is that we have a lot of men who are always in a position where they have to constantly rebuild. They have to build over and over again. The father should already be instilling those bricks, laying that foundation in the child, so that when they come to the point of maturity, they can run with it. But like you said, what we have men who are coming to a point where, like, man, I'm lacking in so many areas that now I have to build upon it, And here I'm later in life without the tools that I needed, or I could have used a very long time ago. And so at best, now they're trying to build within themselves while simultaneously building their own children.
Most definitely.
And it becomes almost to the point where it's unbearable and almost self-defeating, because you want to give up. You're so conscious and aware of your shortcomings that you almost like, hey, I don't even know if it's worth it.
Most definitely. One of the things that a lot of men have expressed is, I wish I would have known how they handled failure. Yeah. I wish I would have known how did they respond to that? What was they feeling? What were their thoughts? What was the next things that they've done? And with working with youth, especially small youth, I see that so many of them struggle with that. They take it so hard to the point where they just feel like it's done. It just didn't go my way, and they just have this meltdown in a sense. And I think that's a huge question to really ask, and to really see that we don't just learn from verbalizing things and just in just communicating things. We also learn by actually watching. Your presence, your just seeing how you communicate things emotionally and physically, it helps them so much just to understand that, you know what, this is another way to do things. You know what, I failed at this, but let me see why I failed. You know what, I failed at this, but you know it ain't over. I can't pick the ball up and shoot again. You get what I'm saying? And I see so many of our young men fail at that. And again, it has a lot to do with how they're managing those emotions. And because that figure is not around, we lack that ability to really manage or control or just how to really express those emotions as well.
You know, you and I work with some very unique, groups. We do stuff in the prison, we do stuff with youth. One of the things in working with a lot of adult male prisoners, inmates, a lot of them have verbalized that they always got the answer, you'll just figure it out. Mm-hmm. And I really believe that when you tell somebody, well, you'll just figure it out, that's a huge disservice that you're doing to that individual, especially when you already know.
Yeah, you went there, man.
Yeah, and as a father, as a father with two sons, I'm serving as a hindrance to my boys if I know the answer and I'm unwilling to tell it to you.
Exactly.
If I'm just, hey, well, you'll figure it out, and I see you struggling, and you're looking at me as an example, and I'm ashamed to let you know that, hey, look, I had trouble in these areas. Mm-hmm. But for me to be like, well, I don't want to reveal that to you, so you'll just figure it out.
Yeah.
And might I tell you that if that's your position, there might be consequences that our youth can't bounce back from, that they can't recover from. And so what this really challenges us to do, once again, going back to that Malachi scripture, the heart of the Father, it was saying that I'm taking a genuine concern. I'm opening myself up so that you could be better positioned to win in life. And so it's not about me feeling insecure with my children, but it's me availing myself to the point where I know that I've set you up for success.
Most definitely. Somebody just commented sometimes in figuring it out, recovery takes a long time. And why is that? Because some of us can even easily look back and just say, you know what, I got a few bumps and bruises I wasn't supposed to experience. Mm-hmm. And because someone else had the answer, and we just have this understanding that, if I just push you in the water, then eventually you're gonna learn how to swim. But there is a chance you can't drown.
Yeah,
you get what I'm saying, and that's on you because you pushed them and you watched them drown. So I think we have to really ask ourselves: are we really meant to learn everything on our own? Are we really meant to learn certain things on our own? Especially you're right there by their side, and you can show them, hey, X, Y, and Z, don't do that. You know what? When you touch that stove, it's gonna be hot. Now, I told you, now it's on you. You get what I'm saying? But at least I can say, you know what? When I did touch that stove, someone did warn me.
Exactly. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm a firm believer of the village mentality. I know it doesn't really exist anymore, but we have a genuine part to play in the success for those who follow behind us. And giving them the tools to win in life is a part of that. Once again, now, if I'm giving you the tools and you still choose to do the wrong thing, then that's on you. Yeah. But I don't want the blood on my hands by saying that, well, hey, they'll just get it together. That's not true. Who's to say that somebody who goes through the same experiences that you went through are going to make it out just as well as you did? Mm-hmm. Just because I survived something does not mean that the next person who goes through the same thing will make it. And that's we have to look at it from that vantage point. We're literally trying to save lives when you're having these conversations. And once again, that's the onus of the father. The father being able to be transparent, to be vulnerable with his own children. To say that I understand how this impacted me, and because it impacted me in such a way, I want to spare this, this fate or this situation for my children.
Yeah, and I want to circle back around because I don't want people just to think that we're just addressing the fathers who are not around. We are addressing the fathers that are present as well. And one of the things I really wanted to express is how we show love. How we show love can really confuse boys and even grown men at this point. We'll probably have that thought. You know what? Did my father really love me, or did he just do what he had to do?
Yeah.
And that can be just a lack of understanding, when it come down to our masculinity again. There are some fathers who don't hug too much. There are fathers who don't believe that you can kiss your son. You know what I'm saying? There are some fathers that probably don't say too often, I love you. I care about you, really, and really getting, really personal and really showing, communicating that love as well. But I think that's okay to do that. Is more to it. We have this understanding that, what, I paid the bills. I got this roof over your head. I'm the reason why you got clothes on your back. And that's my way of showing love. But there are other ways that we can display love to our children.
Yeah, and I'm glad you went there because, you and I have talked about this before. I've spoken about this on several occasions, but I grew up in a household where, the men, we do not show emotions, it was frowned upon, it was almost like taken as a sign of weakness. And it wasn't until I was about 23, 24, getting ready to deploy. I was in the Army at the time, getting ready to go to Iraq. And I remember my father, we were in the car and he said, son, I love you and I apologize for, missing those big events, growing up. And I think it was, maybe the reality that, his son could pass away that really caused my father to become open. But, in having, and me and my father have a great relationship now, some almost 20 years later. But I had a conversation with my dad, and long story short, my father said, he grew up in a household where he didn't hear it. And it wasn't until my father was in his, mid 50s that he finally asked his dad, like, why didn't you say it? And my grandfather said, well, I grew up in the house and I didn't hear it either.
Right.
And so what it was, it became the norm. From generation to generation, it became the norm to be distant from the son.
Right.
And the way we demonstrated love, or the way that love was perceived was, well, I provide for you. I give you food. I put a roof over your head. Just like the movie Fences, when Denzel Washington character was like, hey, son, I don't have to like you. That wasn't part of the arrangement, me and your mom made. And so, sons are almost left to feel like a burden more so than a prize, more so as this is the one who's going to carry on the legacy or whatnot.
Right.
And so a lot of what we see is generation to generation.
Exactly.
And you and I have talked about this before, that, in understanding this, what it does is it opens you up to have more grace and more compassion for your father. Because now you know that, hey, you know what I went through is really a manifestation of what they went through as well.
Mm-hmm.
I have so much compassion and appreciation for my father now that I am a father, because I'm like, ooh, man, yeah, I see the error and some of the mistakes I make.
Most definitely.
And now I have to look back to my father and say, thank you. You were working with the information that you had.
Exactly.
And you did the best job you could with the information that you had.
Man, that's the biggest thing I had to learn just a few years ago. My father, with his father not being in his life, and I've grown a tremendous new appreciation for him, love for him, and it was a lot of things that I put on him based upon what I was lacking. And that was just based on a lack of understanding. But when I had that understanding, I said, you know what? I can put some of this on me as well and gain that understanding. I didn't have this, but let me be the one to initiate it. So now I find myself initiating certain things. I find myself, starting those hard conversations. We even hug different.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's like it's a different. It's no hesitation. There's no hesitation where I love you. I care for you. I'm just calling you to see how you're doing. You get what I'm saying? Because I can't really expect it too much from him. You get what I'm saying? Because if I expected too much from him, then because of my lack of understanding, I'm gonna keep getting let down. And sometimes we get let down because of the expectations that we put on people who can't really fulfill those expectations. I think we have to really, whether it's family or friends, we have to really understand, okay, what type of expectation am I putting on that person, and can that person really fulfill that expectation? But now it's I'm the one really initiating all these things that I thought he should have been the one initiating.
And I want to say on the opposite end of that spectrum, because I see this, with men, friends and stuff like that, who didn't have that with their fathers. It almost becomes like they try to overcompensate, in their relationships, maybe with their children, and they do so from the standpoint of, well, I'm gonna get approval. I'm gonna get approval, and I'm going to show him that I'm a better man than he was.
Yeah.
I'm going to disprove, that I'm anything like him, by doing these things. Mm-hmm. And so, what we're really speaking to is we're speaking to having balance. Mm-hmm. Being able to say, okay, this was my experience, and I can move forward from here, or I can choose to be stuck in this place. But as you're identifying it in yourself, you have to understand that you still have a choice. And what you're speaking to is you're making a choice that, you're not going to hold these things against your father. But in the context of the understood relationship, you're going to move forward.
Yeah. And I really hope, having this conversation will initiate more conversations.
Definitely.
Whatever group that you're a part of, hopefully, if you all have a group or maybe a ministry or whatever the case may be, have these conversations how they're affecting you, your understanding of it, maybe your partner's understanding of it, your friend's understanding of it. Because I really do believe having these conversations is going to really initiate us having more of an understanding. That's what it's all based upon. It's really having an understanding, not who's right, who's wrong. Because part of us feeling like we're at fault is a lack of understanding. Part of us feeling like, I was lacking certain things, so I'm not enough, is part of a lack of understanding. So let's start somewhere. I think we can, because this is the whole reason why we're having these conversations, is because if we don't continue having those conversations and understanding that, the same thing that you were lacking, your father was lacking.
Yeah.
The same thing your father was lacking, your grandfather was lacking as well. And that really helps us understand, or maybe alleviate that pain, if that's safe to say, alleviate that misunderstanding and so forth.
Man, I think we can go on and on. One of the things, because this is so heavy, us both being involved in ministry to different and varying degrees, one thing that I've come to understand within myself and even within other people, when you have a wrong perception of fathering with your own biological father, it really impacts the way you see God as a father. And I can't tell you, for the longest, I almost had like a authoritarian relationship with God, where I felt like, if I was given an assignment and I accomplished the assignment, then I did well. But, I didn't always handle the discipline of God well. It put me back in the mindset of my physical father. And I can tell you that really around the time that when me and my physical, my biological, my natural father really started improving our relationship, I was able to start seeing God in a different light, And so this is not just a natural conversation, but there's also a very real spiritual perspective to look at concerning this topic as well.
Most definitely. Like you said, we can go in so many different directions with this, but for the sake of time, we do have to go. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share the video. Please tag someone in the video. If you have any feedback, please comment any feedback, inboxes. If you have any ideas for any future topics, please email us at whenmenopenup@gmail.com, or you can inbox us. And if you have anything that you would like to promote or advertise during our show, you have that option as well. Just email us whenmenopenup@gmail.com, and we are open for speaking engagements, workshops, and panel discussions as well. We've been having a lot of inquiries and emails coming from different people. So you can email us in inboxes as well. But is there anything else you want to share with people?
I just want to say, hey, thank you all for participating, for being engaged in these conversations. It definitely means a lot to Dominique and I. And so whether it be on Instagram, Facebook, whether you catch us on replay on the various podcast platforms, thank you so much, and just continue to support.
Yeah, and shout out to our new listeners. We have a lot of new listeners, a lot of new supporters. We love you all. We appreciate the feedback. We appreciate the shares, the comments, the feedback, and so forth. We really do appreciate it. But this is When Men Open Up, a show where we are redefining manhood through transparency. My name is Dominique.
And I'm Dexter.
And we are out. Thank you so much.